The story I'm about to tell you is a true story, more cinematic than any movie. In 2025, starring Channing Tatum, a movie was made about one man's extraordinary story. This man robbed McDonald's restaurants, but he was different from ordinary thieves. He didn't enter through the door. He entered through the ceiling. So people called him Roofman, a man who enters from the roof. But what's even more surprising is what happened next. After escaping from prison, this man lived secretly inside a Toys R Us store for a full 6 months. The employees didn't know. The customers didn't know. Every night he played with toys in the store. And during the day he went to church, acting like a good person. Can you believe it? But this actually happened. Now then, let me begin the amazing story of Jeffrey Manchester, also known as Roofman. In November 1998, strange robbery incidents occurred one after another at McDonald's restaurants across the United States. Employees arriving for work in the morning were shocked. There was a square hole about 60 centimeters wide in the ceiling, and a man with a gun came out of the bathroom. But this robber was different. He didn't yell but said this: "I'm sorry. I'm a bad person. You're all good people and I'm sorry for doing this." When taking employees to the freezer, he even said, "It'll be cold, so you might want to put on your jackets." This man's name was Jeffrey Manchester, a 28-year-old former soldier. A veteran of the 82nd Airborne Division, he would climb onto the roof at night, drill a hole, hide in the bathroom waiting for morning, then appear when employees arrived and demand money. From 1998 to 2000, over 2 years, he robbed 40 to 60 McDonald's locations across the country, stealing about $100,000, 130 million won. People called him Roofman. May 20, 2000. Belmont, a small city in North Carolina. That night, Jeffrey robbed a McDonald's, and the next morning, right nearby, he tried to rob another McDonald's. But this time, one of the employees quickly pressed the silent alarm. Police were dispatched. Jeffrey ran, but the police didn't lose him. He hid in the grass near a church parking lot, but was discovered by police. As the handcuffs were being put on, Jeffrey said this: "You did really good work today. Thank you for your service." A robber praising the police. At trial, Jeffrey's charges were announced. It wasn't simple robbery. He threatened employees with a gun. So armed robbery. He locked employees in the freezer. So unlawful imprisonment. And surprisingly, even kidnapping charges were added. The judge said, 45 years in prison. Jeffrey was 29 at the time. He would be 74 before he could get out. Jeffrey was a model prisoner at Brown Creek Correctional Institution. Working in the metal shop, he quietly planned for 4 years. June 15, 2004, the day finally came. Jeffrey took a black plywood board he'd secretly made and went under a delivery truck. Using skills learned in the military, he hid his body perfectly. When the truck passed through the prison gate, the guard didn't check under the truck. That's how he gained his freedom. Hitchhiking to Charlotte, Jeffrey needed a hiding place. The place he chose was a Toys R Us store. He made a secret room with boxes in a small space behind the bicycle section. For 6 months, Jeffrey hid in his secret room during the day and wandered the store at night. He ate baby food and snacks bit by bit. drove RC cars on the roof, and rolled around the store wearing Heelys. Once an employee discovered the secret room. But Jeffrey quickly moved to Circuit City, the building next door. During the day, Jeffrey attended Crossroads Church under the fake name, John. The church people liked him for being friendly and working hard at volunteer service. There he met Lee Wainscott, a mother of 3 children, and they started dating. When Lee asked about his job, he deflected, saying, "It's classified government work, I can't talk about it." But on December 26, 2004, Jeffrey makes a big mistake. He robs that very Toys R Us where he'd been living for 6 months. 2 employees quickly escaped and called the police, and police discovered the secret passage. Sleeping bag, clothes, and toys in the store. Police found out Jeffrey was dating Lee. They asked for her cooperation, and on January 5, 2005, Lee's birthday, they called him out. When Jeffrey appeared at the meeting place, police emerged from all directions. 6 months of freedom ended just like that. At trial, the judge sentenced him to an additional 40 years. Added to the existing 45 years, a total of 85 years. Jeffrey attempted to escape again in 2009 and 2017 but failed. He's still in prison now, with a release date of December 4, 2036. Everyone, how was this story? Hard to believe but all true. The story of a man who drilled through ceilings to rob McDonald's, escaped from prison and hid in Toys R Us, went to church, acting like a good person, and even dated a girlfriend. Jeffrey was a strange criminal. He was kind to his victims. He made sure they had jackets, said he was sorry, and never used violence. Some victims later said, he was really like a polite gentleman. But does that justify his crimes? No. The McDonald's employees suffered trauma. The experience of being threatened by a gun-wielding robber and locked in a freezer never left them. Some employees couldn't work night shifts for years. They developed panic disorders. In 2025, the movie, Roofman, starring Channing Tatum was released. Director Derek Cianfrance had phone conversations with Jeffrey for 4 years. Jeffrey said jokingly, "Channing and I have a lot in common. We're both high energy. We both played football, and we're both really good looking." The movie portrays Jeffrey as charming. But in reality, he's a criminal who committed 40 to 60 armed robberies, imprisonments, and kidnappings. We must be careful. Just because a story is entertaining doesn't mean we should glorify crime. But at the same time, we must acknowledge that humans are complex. Jeffrey made bad choices, but behind those choices were the sadness of losing family, helplessness, and despair. He married at 20 and started a family, but got divorced, and had no special skills besides those from the military. He later said, "I wanted to build a house to live in with my family. But I didn't know any other way." That doesn't justify the crime, but we can understand. Jeffrey's story shows the importance of choices. He chose crime in his despair. Over 2 years, he stole $100,000 from 40 to 60 robberies, and paid the price with a 45-year sentence. Even after escaping, he committed crimes again, and received an additional 40 years, for a total sentence of 85 years. He received his first sentence at 29, with a release date of December 4, 2036. He'll be 65 then. spending most of his life in prison for 2 years of crime. The Toys R Us store where Jeffrey lived for 6 months no longer exists. Toys R Us went bankrupt in 2018. But the employees who worked at that store will probably tell this story for life. Someone lived in our store for 6 months. Nobody knew. A man who drove RC cars every night, skated wearing Heelys, and played with toys. Jeffrey later said, being trapped in a toy store for 6 months. You feel like a little kid. Maybe that's what he truly wanted. To return to childhood where he could play without responsibility. But reality was different. What about his girlfriend Lee? The John she loved was actually an escaped convict and robber. Not a classified government agent, but a criminal who secretly lived in Toys R Us. Stole toys, and gave them as gifts to children. Lee cooperated with police to call Jeffrey out for a birthday dinner. And she watched him get arrested. What was in her heart? Betrayal, shock, and perhaps some relief? Jeffrey didn't give up. In 2009 and 2017, he attempted to escape again. But both times he failed. Now he's in a maximum security prison where escape is nearly impossible. His first escape succeeded, but he was caught after 6 months. And his sentence only increased. If he'd quietly served his time then, he might have been released by now. But he chose freedom, and he's paying the price. How was today's story? Jeffrey Manchester, aka Roofman. He must have heard about this movie from prison. His story being told to people around the world. And a famous actor like Channing Tatum playing him. How does that feel? What would you have done? Having lost your family, in a situation of despair. What choice would you have made? Of course, most people don't choose crime. They find other jobs, get vocational training, receive government assistance, or ask family and friends for help. But Jeffrey made that choice. And he's spending most of his life in prison for it. What we should remember from this story. First, crime always creates victims. No matter how politely Jeffrey acted, the moment he pointed a gun, people trembled in fear. Second, one bad choice can change a lifetime. Jeffrey is spending 85 years in prison for 2 years of crime. Third, running away is not a solution. He escaped and enjoyed 6 months of freedom, but was eventually caught and his sentence only increased. Fourth, humans are complex. Jeffrey is a bad person, but he also had kind and polite aspects. People cannot be simply divided into good and evil. Although Toys R Us is gone, the legend of Roofman remains. The polite robber who drilled through ceilings to rob McDonald's. The escaped convict who secretly lived in a toy store for 6 months. A real story more cinematic than any movie. This story asks us, what choices will we make in despair? And are we prepared to bear the consequences of those choices? Everyone, that's all for tonight. The story of Roofman who hid in Toys R Us. Hard to believe, but it actually happened. A real story more cinematic than any movie. Have a good night. And remember, whatever choices we make, we must take responsibility for the consequences.